I stood on the 45th floor of my company's headquarters, a glass fortress overlooking the concrete canyons of Chicago. The city hummed with a life I felt I controlled, a symphony of commerce and ambition that I had orchestrated. My name is Eleanor Vance, and at 32, I am the CEO of Nexus Innovations. But this isn't a story about my success. It's a story about my brother, Liam. Liam was a gentle soul, an artist with a heart too big for the brutal world of business. He'd always been my parents' favorite, their golden boy, showered with a kind of affection I never received. While I was crunching numbers and making deals, he was painting landscapes and chasing dreams. The gap between us widened with every promotion I earned and every gallery rejection he faced. He saw me as a cold, distant figure, a caricature of corporate greed. I saw him as a burden, a reminder of the soft, weak parts of myself I had long since purged. A few months ago, he came to me for help. His savings were gone. His passion project stalled. He needed a job, a regular job. That's when the idea struck me. I wouldn't just give him a job, I would give him a lesson. I created a fake shell company, a subsidiary of Nexus, designed for a single purpose: to hire Liam for a miserable, thankless role. He'd be a data consolidation specialist for a company called Viridian Systems. He wouldn't know the job was a sham, a cruel experiment crafted just for him. He would just be grateful for the work, any work. He accepted the offer with a smile that felt like a punch to my gut. He thanked me profusely, his eyes filled with a hope I found infuriating. "Eleanor," he said, "thank you for believing in me." The words felt like ash in my mouth. I didn't believe in him. I wanted to break him. I wanted him to understand the true cost of failure, the price of not being me. This was my grand design, a perfectly executed revenge. It was beautiful in its cruelty. And it was just beginning. If you're enjoying this story, remember to subscribe to the channel for more incredible videos. The early days of the job were a delight to watch. I had a hidden camera in his small windowless office, a space I'd had specially designed to be as soul-crushing as possible. The walls were a sickly beige, the fluorescent lights flickered, and the air was thick with the scent of cheap cleaning products. His task was to manually transcribe thousands of pages of outdated financial data, a job so tedious it bordered on torture. The files were intentionally disorganized, filled with typos and errors that he had to correct one by one. He started with a determined optimism that I found almost endearing. He'd hum to himself as he worked, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He'd bring in a small houseplant, a hopeful splash of green in a world of gray. He'd even try to organize the messy file cabinets, a pointless gesture I found both naive and frustrating. But the grind began to take its toll. The humming stopped. The shoulders that had been so straight began to slouch. The lines of fatigue appeared under his eyes. I would watch him from my office, sipping coffee, a satisfied smile on my face. My plan was working. The constant, repetitive strain was wearing him down. One day, I saw him talking on the phone during his break, his voice low and defeated. "Yeah, it's a lot of work, Sarah," he said, "but it's a job. And I'm good at it, I think." His voice cracked slightly on the last part. He was trying to convince himself, to find dignity in the indignity I had created for him. It was a pathetic sight. I had planned for this. I had built in a series of minor crises. The network would randomly crash, deleting hours of his work. The printer would jam, spewing reams of paper he'd have to sort through. These little moments of torment were my favorite part of the process. I was the puppet master, pulling the strings of his misery, and he was dancing perfectly to my tune. The first few weeks turned into months, and Liam's initial enthusiasm was completely gone. The plant on his desk withered, its leaves turning brown and brittle. He no longer hummed, the silence of his office broken only by the click of the keyboard. But then, a small complication arose. He started talking to his colleagues. I had hired a few other people for the project, all of them actors, people I had vetted carefully to ensure they would follow my script. Their role was simple: to be just as miserable as he was, to reinforce the futility of the work. But Liam, with his inherent kindness, started to subvert my plan. He would bring in donuts for the team, or stay late to help a colleague with a particularly difficult data set. He was building connections, finding small islands of humanity in the sea of tedium I had created. I watched him on my monitor, a frown creasing my forehead. One of the actors, a woman named Chloe, had a sick mother, and Liam would listen to her stories with genuine concern. He started to bring her soup he'd made himself, a gesture so simple and kind it infuriated me. He was turning my sterile, cruel experiment into a community. My project manager, a man I trusted implicitly, called me. "He's making it hard, Eleanor," he said. "The others are starting to genuinely like him. He's inspiring them." The word hung in the air, a poison to my perfectly structured plan. I had to intervene. I called Liam into my office, a space of polished mahogany and steel, a stark contrast to his. He looked tired, his artist's hands calloused and raw from the endless typing. I put on my most professional, detached mask. "Liam," I said, "I've been reviewing your performance. It's adequate, but you're spending too much time on extracurricular activities. This is a job, not a social club. Focus on the work." He nodded, his eyes cast down. He didn't argue. He didn't protest. He just accepted my criticism and walked away. I thought I had put a stop to his attempts at connection. I was wrong. I watched as my brother, despite my warning, doubled down on his acts of kindness. He wasn't just working anymore. He was becoming the heart of that little office. He organized a small lunch for Chloe and another colleague, celebrating a minor milestone. They didn't have much to celebrate, but they were doing it anyway. He was creating joy in a place I had designed for despair. Then, the unexpected happened. Chloe's mother had a sudden health crisis, and she needed time off. My actors were instructed to fake concern, but ultimately prioritize their work. Liam, however, did not follow the script. He took his meager vacation days and went with Chloe to the hospital. He sat with her for hours, holding her hand, a small, quiet presence of support. My project manager called me, his voice a mix of frustration and awe. "Eleanor, what do we do? He's gone completely off script. He's a genuinely good person." I didn't know what to do. My plan, so meticulously laid out, was failing because of something I had never accounted for: his inherent decency. I felt a cold knot of dread in my stomach. The cruelty of my plan, which I had reveled in, now felt hollow. The joy I had felt in his suffering was replaced by a gnawing emptiness. I had built this elaborate cage, and he was simply walking through the bars, leaving a trail of kindness in his wake. He returned to work a few days later, looking more exhausted than ever, but with a new light in his eyes. He had a purpose beyond just surviving the day. He was helping people. He was being a friend. My carefully constructed reality was falling apart. He was not the weak, dependent man I wanted to prove him to be. He was stronger than I was. He was happy. And I, the master manipulator, the one who had everything, was miserable. If you're enjoying this story, remember to subscribe to the channel for more incredible videos. The facade had to fall. The company was supposed to be dissolved in a few weeks, but I couldn't let it go on. The sight of my brother, thriving in the misery I had created, was a constant, unbearable reminder of my own coldness. I decided to end it all and reveal the truth. The cruelest part of my plan, the grand finale, was at hand. I called Liam into my office again, the one with the panoramic view of the city he didn't know I owned. I told him to sit down, and he did, his face a mask of polite expectation. "Liam," I began, my voice steady, "I have to be honest with you. Viridian Systems is a shell company. It's an experiment, and you were a part of it." His expression didn't change at first. He just blinked, a slow, confused motion. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "I mean, the job was fake," I said, my voice growing harder, the words spilling out like a poison I couldn't hold back. "The data was useless. The network crashes, the printer jams. It was all designed. All of it. I own the company. I am your boss. I did it to prove a point." A slow understanding dawned on his face, followed by a look of profound, heart-wrenching betrayal. His eyes, usually so soft, hardened into chips of ice. You did this to me?" he asked, the words raw with disbelief. I felt a surge of cold satisfaction, the first real joy I'd had in weeks. "Yes," I said. "I did. You've always been so coddled, so pure. I wanted you to see what the real world was like. I wanted you to struggle, to fail. I wanted you to know what it felt like to be me." He didn't scream or shout. He just stood up slowly, his body stiff. He looked at me, not with anger, but with a deep, sorrowful pity. "I thought you were helping me, Eleanor," he said, his voice full of a pain that cut deeper than any rage. "I thanked you. I was so grateful. I told everyone my sister believed in me. I was so proud of you." Those last words hit me like a physical blow. The pride in his voice, the gratitude I had dismissed as weakness, now felt like a condemnation. He didn't see me as a corporate monster. He saw me as his sister, and I had broken his trust completely. Liam left my office without another word. The silence he left behind was deafening. I expected him to fight, to scream, to lash out. But he didn't. He just walked away, and in his silence I felt the full weight of my actions. The satisfaction I thought I would feel was completely gone, replaced by a hollow emptiness. The next few days were a blur of professional obligations and personal torment. I sat in my luxurious office, staring at the panoramic view. But all I could see was the look on my brother's face. The betrayal. The pity. Then the phone calls started. First it was our mother. Her voice was cold, formal. "Eleanor," she said, "I don't know what you did, but Liam is home. He's heartbroken. He won't talk to anyone. Please don't call here again." She hung up before I could respond. It was the first time she had ever been that distant with me. Next, it was my father. His voice was heavy with disappointment. "How could you do this?" he asked, his words laced with a sorrow that was more painful than any anger. "He looked up to you. He always has. You broke his trust in the cruelest way possible. I'm ashamed of you." The corporate world I had so carefully built began to feel like a house of cards. My colleagues noticed my change in demeanor. The confident, ruthless CEO was gone, replaced by a distracted, quiet woman. I tried to bury myself in work, but it was useless. Every deal I closed, every successful launch, felt meaningless. My success had cost me the one thing I couldn't buy: my family. I tried to call Liam, to apologize, but his number was disconnected. I went to his apartment, but he was gone. He had moved out, leaving no forwarding address. The silence from him was the worst punishment of all. I had won the game, but I had lost everything that mattered. My carefully constructed corporate facade began to crack under the weight of my personal collapse. The joy of my work was gone, replaced by a gnawing guilt. The company, Nexus Innovations, which had once felt like an extension of myself, now felt alien, a symbol of my cruelty. I was the CEO of a company that had made me the loneliest person in the world. Then, the true consequences began to unfold. My hired actors, the ones who had played Liam's colleagues, had seen the genuine kindness and compassion he had shown them. They hadn't just been acting. They had been genuinely touched by him. They had formed a bond with him, a real one, something I had scoffed at. Chloe, the woman whose mother Liam had helped, was the first to speak out. She contacted a reporter, telling her the entire story of the fake company, the fake job, and the genuine man who had been a victim of a cruel corporate experiment. The article was brutal, a detailed exposé of my actions. It painted me as a heartless, soulless monster who had used her power to torment her own brother. The media storm was immediate and fierce. The news went viral. "The CEO who broke her brother's heart" was the headline. My face was on every news channel, a symbol of corporate villainy. Investors began to pull out, worried about the public backlash. My board of directors called an emergency meeting. They were polite but firm. My behavior had damaged the company's reputation beyond repair. I sat at the head of the table, listening to the words I had always used on others. Damaged goods, liability, untenable position. The irony was a bitter pill. I had built this empire, and now it was crumbling around me, not because of a bad market or a failed product, but because of my own cruelty. I had been so focused on proving a point to my brother that I had forgotten that my actions had a ripple effect. I had underestimated the power of human connection, the very thing I had tried to destroy. The love and support Liam had shown to others was now coming back to haunt me. If you're enjoying this story, remember to subscribe to the channel for more incredible videos. The board's decision was unanimous. I was to step down as CEO. The company, my company, was taking a significant hit in the stock market. My carefully cultivated public image was in tatters. I was no longer the brilliant, visionary leader. I was the villain, the cruel sister, the one who had everything and still chose to inflict pain. I signed the papers, my hand trembling slightly. It was a humiliating moment, one I had never imagined I would experience. My reign as the Queen of Nexus Innovations was over. I walked out of the building I had built, a place that once felt like home, now a monument to my own hubris. The days that followed were a blur of public scrutiny and private despair. The once constant stream of calls and messages from colleagues and friends dried up. I was alone in my lavish penthouse, the silence a stark contrast to the constant hum of my previous life. The city lights outside my window, once a symbol of my power, now just seemed to mock me. I tried to reach out to my parents again, but their numbers were blocked. My mother had returned the gifts I had sent her over the years, the packages arriving with no note, a clear message of her rejection. My father had sent me a single email. "He's better off without you." I had achieved my goal. I had made Liam feel the pain of failure, but in doing so, I had lost my family, my reputation, and my life's work. The victory was a mirage, the prize a handful of ash. I had always believed that success was measured by what you owned, what you built, what you controlled. But as I sat alone in my empty apartment, I realized I had nothing. I had always defined myself by my ambition, by the ruthless pursuit of power. I had purged all emotions I considered weak: empathy, compassion, love. I had convinced myself that these were weaknesses, liabilities in the cold world of business. Now, I saw them for what they were, the very things that made us human. Weeks turned into months. I spent my days in a haze of guilt and regret, the walls of my penthouse closing in on me. I had everything I could ever want, and yet I was utterly miserable. I tried to find my old satisfaction in work, but I no longer had any. The world I had built was gone, and the person I had been no longer existed. One day, I saw a small article in a local paper. It was about a small art gallery opening on the north side of the city. The artist's name was Liam Vance, my brother. A part of me wanted to ignore it, to pretend it wasn't happening. But a stronger, more urgent feeling pulled me in. I had to see him, to try and explain, to apologize. I had to face the man I had tried to break. I went to the gallery on a rainy Friday evening. It was a small, modest space, a world away from the sterile towers of my old life. The room was filled with his paintings, vibrant and full of life. They were landscapes, but not of the city. They were of the quiet corners of the world, of parks and forests, of sunsets and sunrises. They were filled with a kind of hope and peace that I hadn't felt in years. I saw him across the room, talking to a small group of people. He looked different. The exhaustion was gone, replaced by a quiet confidence. He was no longer a victim. He was a creator. The look of betrayal I had seen on his face that day had been replaced by a quiet resolve. He had used my cruelty as fuel, as motivation. He had taken the pain I had inflicted and turned it into art. I stood in a corner, watching him, my heart a raw, bleeding wound. He had moved on. He had built a new life, a better one, from the ashes of the one I had tried to burn. My plan had failed spectacularly. I had intended to destroy him, and instead, I had set him free. I watched from the shadows as he spoke about his work. He talked about his inspiration, about the power of finding beauty in the most unexpected places. He talked about the people who had supported him, the friends he had made at his last job, a job I had created to be a prison. He spoke of Chloe, whose mother was now in remission, and of the bond they had formed. He never mentioned me, not once. I was a ghost in his narrative. After the crowd thinned, I saw him walking toward me. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. The moment I had dreaded and longed for. He stopped a few feet away, his gaze steady and unwavering. "Eleanor," he said, his voice calm. "What are you doing here?" There was no anger, no hatred, just a quiet resignation. I wanted to see you," I stammered, the words feeling foreign and clumsy in my mouth. "I wanted to apologize. For everything." He looked at me, his eyes searching, and I saw a flicker of the old pain, the betrayal. But it was quickly replaced by something else. Pity. He took a deep breath. "Eleanor," he said, "I've thought about it a lot. What you did, it was cruel. It was terrible. But it also saved me." I blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "I was lost," he said. "I was a failure. I was living in a fantasy world. You forced me to face reality. You showed me what I was capable of, not just of surviving, but of connecting with people. You showed me that I could be strong, that my kindness wasn't a weakness, but a strength." He looked at me, not with hatred, but with a kind of weary empathy. "I've forgiven you," he said, "but I can't forget. I've moved on, Eleanor. I have a life now, a real one." He then turned and walked away, back to his gallery, to his art, to his new life. I stood there, alone in the rain, watching his back as he disappeared into the lights of the city. I was the one left behind, the one who had nothing. My plan had failed. I had tried to break him, and instead, I had broken myself. The cold, empty feeling in my chest was the only proof I needed. I had won the battle, but I had lost the war. If you've enjoyed this story, remember to subscribe to the channel for more incredible videos.